everybody. So once again, welcome to the Virtual Agile Meetup. Today we are so excited to have Diana Larsen with us, who is going to be speaking to us about keeping retrospectives relevant in this changing world. Changing and challenging, I might add to that. Certainly challenging for me. So thank you so much for joining us. And we don't want to take too much time, but as you know, we like to do a little bit of housekeeping. Um, we are recording the session. As you know, we love to see people's faces, enjoying it. So keep cameras on, that'd be great. But if you feel uncomfortable with that, go turn your cameras off. We say with the chat and any questions, we love to see chat in the chat box. So do go for that. For any questions today, we're going to say we're going to keep the questions to the end. So do pop those in the chat as well, and then we can kind of go through those and hopefully be able to get through most of them. But no promises there, because remember, 55 minutes. That's our time box. That's pretty much that on there. In terms of fire exits, we are all in our own home or our own office. So just get out. I'm not going to tell you where mine is because it won't make sense to you. That's pretty much it on the housekeeping. What else? For those who are returners to the Virtual Agile, the little game that I like to throw in just to warm us up. It's always good to warm your hands up before you join a Zoom call. So I'm going to attempt to do that. I think that's rock, paper, scissors is a global game. But essentially, I'd love to see your best rock. Just show me your best rock. Yes. Nice. Paper. Beautiful. Really nice. And the scissors is a bit of a strange one because in the UK it can be seen as a bad day. But you can have a good day, a bad day from scissors. Yeah, all the Brits out there, hopefully you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so we've got a rock, we've got a paper, we've got a scissors, and I'm going to ask you three questions, and you've got to respond with I agree, I'm not sure, I disagree. And depending on what time at night I did this, some of these questions don't make sense, but I hope these ones do. So firstly, retrospectives are all about inspection and adaptation. Ooh, a few papers out there, not sure. We got a rock out there and some nons. So joining rock, paper, scissors. Second question. I've heard about retrospectives. I'm yet to feel the real power of them. Got some disagree. There's people retrospectives, you heard about them, you know what they're about, and you know the power of them. And then the last one is, come on, Helen, Diana Larsen's here. Get on with it. Putting two rocks on like that. I'm already fed up with my own voice. Okay. So on that note, I'm actually going to hand over to Ines for a few moments to introduce.
Sure, just to bring us into place that we've seen retros, time to pause, reflect, and learn, do something about it. It is certainly easier said than done. And I'm so very chuffed to finally have Diana with us. We have been talking about this for a long time, so no pressure, but thanks, hi. Really happy to have you here with us. Little contribution I can say to introduce yourself, but you're a prolific contributor to the Agile community, and especially with the multiple different books that you have published. The most recent one, the Agile Retrospective second edition, which both Helen and I happily contributed to some of the stories. Also, Leading Without Blame, for the ones that haven't checked that one out, I will highly recommend it. And many, many more. But again, enough of our voices. Diana, please take it away. Thank you so much to spend this time with us.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. As you said, Ines, we've been working on making this happen for quite a while. I had quite the turbulent year last year, so I had to keep adjusting my schedules and so on. Also, I want to say one other thing, and I meant to talk with Helen and Ines about this. If I see in the chat or in the participants list somebody come in that I recognize as a troll or as a recording the transcript of my talk or those kinds of things, I will leave. I've experienced that before, and I've learned that once I see that happening, it doesn't get better. And the only way to stop it is for me to just go. So I'm really hoping that there's a lot more uh, guardrails around this talk. I think there probably are. I think Ines and I talked about this when we met. But just for the rest of you, if I suddenly disappear, you'll know it's because in the participant list there, I've detected somebody that has given me problems before, or I can tell is going to give problems this time. So, but otherwise, we'll just sail right through and it'll be great. So, so I want to do that. And so let's, I'll share my slides and we will get going. So I've given a few different versions of this talk. If you go out on YouTube or at some other conference sessions, you'll see that there's sort of various versions of this that look and slightly different for each audience, really. But it started about more the mechanics of it. I talked about, smaller retrospectives, more frequent retrospectives. That was the beginning of thinking about it. But as I thought about it, and as Ines and I talked about this talk, I realized it was really about the reason behind those smaller or more frequent or the other kinds of things I talked about, more attention to remote teams, things like that. It really is about keeping retrospectives relevant in a changing world, keeping them useful, keeping them effective at helping us do continuous improvement. And so that's what we're going to be focused on today. So let me just see here. So, I'm glad you didn't do the introduction because I've got it here on a slide. For those of you who aren't familiar with my background, my proudest moment is that I have been able to contribute to my Agile community. I value this group. I value the events that I attend as a part of being an Agilist in today's world. And so I've really tried to give back, both in talks and in my writing, and particularly models and books. And my next to the most recent book is Lead Without Blame. And my most recent, and when I looked as I was writing that one, and I looked past at all the books that I had written and the different talks I had given, I realized that I didn't make a Venn diagram here, but it kind of created a Venn diagram where my talks are about the role of valiant leaders who are really trying to make it happen, creating dynamic environments so that they can have resilient teams. And that those three things, it's where those come together that is where my interest lies and where my passion is for creating health for everyone involved in that interaction. And so that's my contributions in the Agile Retrospective second edition kind of underscore that as well. The first edition of the Agile Retrospectives came out in 2006. And so 17 or 18 years later is not too soon to have created a new one. And we have seen a lot of changes. We've seen a lot of patterns emerge in how people do retrospectives, how the outcomes that they're getting, and so on. And so I'll be talking about that in this talk. So let's get started. So since 2006, Esther and I have been getting a lot of feedback on what really happens out here in the real world when we do retrospectives. And our colleague David, who became our co-author on the second edition, he was a founder of a company called Retrium, which is an online retrospectives service. And he was hearing the same things. So what we were hearing is retrospectives just take too long. We can't take that much time away from the work to do these meetings. They're either too formalized or they're not formal enough. And what's humorous to me is that we've heard both. They're either too formal, we can't, that's too rigid, we can't do it that way, or they're not structured and formal enough. There's too much wiggle room for teams to get the outcomes that they want. Teams not getting any improvement results, not they're spending time in retrospectives and then not getting a benefit from spending that time together, which is sad and unhappy, and certainly not what Esther and I were looking for when we when we wrote the book. Waste of precious work time. This is time we could be spending working as opposed to investing any time in improving, which is sort of an interesting comment. And then finally, the fifth most common one. We've heard others as well, but these are the five most common ones. They're just too challenging. In a virtual world, in an on-site world, in a hybrid world, there's just too many different ways that we need to do it, and that's just too challenging, and we really can't manage that. So Esther and I and David recognize that there are a lot of folks out in the world, and many of them we invited to share their stories with us and we put them in the book. And for ourselves, these weren't the outcomes we were getting. And so we wondered what might be the impediment, what might be the barriers to all teams having the right size retrospectives and having them have just enough structure and formality, and having finding improvements to make every time, or and it didn't feel like, it felt like part of the work, not a waste of work time, but actually part of the work. And people were learning how to facilitate for remote teams and so on. So that's partly why we felt like it is time to write this second edition. So, people aren't getting follow through. They're seeing retrospectives as separate from the work. And it's the big one for me is software development is not recognized as learning work. And big improvements are hard. And that is absolutely true. So what can we do about this? Well, first we have to think about what is learning work. And way back in 1990, Peter Senge was in his book, The Fifth Discipline, and in others of his writing, and he's not the only one, but he's a good example, was already writing about that the nature of work was shifting for what we had in the past called knowledge workers. The nature of the work it was shifting to continual learning. And continual learning that is rich and powerful is best done in teams, is best done collaboratively. And this is a quote from his book. The teams are the fundamental learning unit. And so unless teams can learn collaboratively, the organization can't be a learning organization and can't take advantage of the opportunities for learning as a collective that's out in the world. For those of you who have read or had been introduced to the Lead Without Blame book, you know that we say that co-intelligence is one of the primary team motivators, one of the essential team motivators. When we've had that experience of working on a team where we really can share our learning and understand what new learnings we need, and so on, it's a powerful experience. And when people lose it, their team goes away or whatever, they are always trying to recreate it because it is such a powerful experience and so enriching. So learning work, we need to go there. And the interesting thing about learning and learning work is that it creates a cycle. We learn something new that then we become the people who know that, who've learned that thing, And that changes us. And that allows us to see new opportunities in the world. And that awareness of the new things that have resulted from our changes tell us what new things we need to learn. And that is just kind of a continuing cycle all the time. And if you think about your own learning, you know that once you gain a new skill, you can never go back to being that person who was lacking that skill before. The new learning always colors everything in your life. You have new awarenesses of abstract connections. All kinds of new things happen. You are changed. And when teams learn together or organizations learn together, they are changed, and it opens up opportunities for new learning. So, what are some solutions to those problems in retrospectives? And how do we create that rich co-intelligence that allows us to take advantage of the retrospective opportunities? So one is we begin more and more to embed learning in the workflow. And you'll see how these are going to connect later to some of the ideas that I'll be introducing. You still want to keep the retrospectives framework because it connects to how people learn and how individuals learn, and in a fractal kind of way expands that to how teams and organizations learn. So we need that framework. We get to adjust the time to fit the work. We don't necessarily always have to have the same amount of time for a retrospective. It has to do with what kind of work are we doing and other factors. We can increase the frequency of our retrospectives or decrease it, for that matter, to fit the need. It generally results in an increase, but we could also go the other way. And if we focus on group learning, we get that benefit of ongoing improvement because people are always coming with new ideas to share with the team, and everyone who is a part of that gets to benefit. So just to remind you, and we've got a little similar kind of graphic on the cover of the book, the 5-part framework that Esther and I introduced, and it's not unique. It is not that different from build, measure, learn. It's not that different from the OODA loop. It's not that different. I mean, if you look at them, there's a lot of similarities to any of these things that talk about how do you help people collectively in a group move through ideas and have new awarenesses. But the way we framed it was in this Mobius strip that just is a continuous moving. We've done some work. We've had an iteration. We've done some work. Then we move into having a retrospective. And in that retrospective, we do some facilitation. We set the stage for the thinking and learning that we're going to do together. And then the first task is to gather data so that everyone in the group, everyone on the team, everyone in the organization, if we're going that big, has the same set of data to work from. We're not working with different data. We all have the same big picture. Whatever the focus is, we're looking at the same thing so that we can together generate insights about that, analyze it, understand the implications, think about the possibilities, that sort of thing. And then once we've had that chance as a group to do that, then we get to decide what we want to do next. And then we get to close the retrospective, and another sort of facilitation of that meeting. And then we move back into the next part of the work that we are engaged in with this new understanding about the work and the way we want to improve the work. So it should be a seamless flow. So, and the reason that we have set the stage, gather data, generate insights, decide what to do, and close the retrospective is that that's the way our individual brains work. Only in our minds, we do it in split seconds. We notice something in our environment. We see what some of the aspects of it are. We think about what's possible. We decide what we want to do about that, if we want to make a change, if we want to leave it the way it is, and then we just decide to move on, right? So if I'm looking around here and I notice, what this is never true, but I notice that, oh, I have no sticky notes to take notes on while I'm on this talk. Well, it's like, oh, okay, well, I don't have any sticky notes right here where I am. Where are the closest ones? I gather data about my environment. When I get them, I make a mental note. Maybe I'll want to put them in a place where they're more easily accessible next time. I decide where that place might be. I put a few there, and I move on to the next thing that is in my view. And I just realized that there is a typo here. That should say close the retrospective. Interesting. So I've seen this, I don't know how many times, and I just now noticed that in the graphic. So, and when we move through that process, we do it in a moment, right? But when we bring a group of people together and we want to take them through that same thinking and getting to a decision and move, and then being able to move on to the next thing, that takes a little bit of time. And it takes some skill in helping a group of people move through that thinking process, that learning, thinking, deciding process together as a collective. And so that's why the retrospective framework is the way it is. So first, let's talk about smaller retrospectives, micro retros. I was first introduced to this idea by some folks who were doing what's called ensemble or mob programming. And they were saying that they were working, and I think it also works in a lot of teams that are using sort of the Pomodoro technique, where you work for 25 minutes and then you take a short break and then you work for another 25 minutes to manage your energy and to kind of refresh your thinking as you take those breaks and come back to the work. Micro retros are something that happens at every one of those breaks. So because it's in that 5-minute break that this has to happen, it has to be very small, which is why we call it micro. So doing that is the principle that smaller retrospectives more often will add up. So if we're doing these smaller retrospectives, it's like it's a little bit like I don't know how many of you saw Superman 2, but where you collect or maybe Office Space is another a more recent movie version of that. The idea that if you are collecting portions of a penny over and over and over again, it really begins to add up over time. So we're going to look at that. So the first thing we want to do is learn smaller. Take smaller chunks of learning. Make the focus of your retrospective a more contained, smaller focus that can be dealt with in the amount of time that you have. So the joke here is, there's an elephant on our plate. How do we eat an elephant? Does anybody know the answer to that joke? Drop it in the chat. Right? How do you eat a whale? Or this is a whale, not an elephant. How do you eat a whale? One bite at a time, right? Alistair Coburn has a programming technique he calls elephant sashimi, which is a very similar thing. You know, we take this, we've got this task in front of us and we slice it thin as sashimi to accomplish what we need to accomplish in it. So more often means that we find a cadence where we can have these smaller, shorter, maybe 3-minute retrospectives, but have them very frequently. So if we're dealing with a small thing, but we're dealing with it very frequently, we can do this. Now, hobbits could use their mealtime schedule for that, for those of you who are Lord of the Rings fans. they could, if they did a little retro at breakfast and at second breakfast and at Levins's and about how to improve their day, by the end of the day, they're going to have a much better day than they maybe started out with. So the idea is for you to consider in your team and have a conversation in your team, how is it that you work now? What is your cadence of work? Do you have a morning, but do you have a morning kind of coffee time together? Do you then have a midday something in between that and lunch? Do you have a break at lunchtime? Or is there some other cadence that where you can increase the frequency, where you stop and say, is there anything we can improve about our situation, and how will we go about doing that? And so I'm going to give you some techniques for how you might do that. But I want you to think about that. And if you have any questions as I go along, um, hold them until they occur to you and then write them in the chat. That's a joke from Esther. I love that one. Write them in the chat and capture them, and then we'll deal with them when we get to the end. So that smaller retrospectives more often helps us get continuous improvement in our teams. We are kind of getting that what's that called? I'll think of it in a bit. So we want teams that are seeking team greatness all the time and know that they'll never become perfect, but they can continue to become better. And as a team, in their teamwork, in their product quality, in their relationship with the rest of the organization, whatever aspect of their teamwork that is, they can become greater. But then when you're doing that tiny little micro retro, one of the ways that you can accomplish that is at that moment, we'll use the Pomodoro example. We've worked for 25 minutes. We're taking a break. We just ask a question. What is still annoying us? Or what is new that's annoying us? Or what do we want to celebrate because we don't want to forget to do that during the next chunk of work? And so we ask that question. What more can we learn that would help us and help us make our work simpler? And what's one small thing we can do or learn right now? And the emphasis there is on very small. And I've talked with teams that have made little incremental improvements, like bringing in a plant because their room feels sort of airless all the time. They're in a basement office or something, or they're just, and that would be for a co-located team. But how can we improve our online communication? Is there something we can do? Could we have a new working agreement? Can we do, something small that we can take care of right in the moment that will make our lives as a team better, or make us feel like we're getting closer to team greatness? So that's a big way of thinking and is not always achievable by teams that are full of juniors or who have just come together and have not worked together before. And so one technique for helping teams that are in that situation is to find a focus. It helps to have a very specific focus in order to make that job of finding the thing that you can improve a little bit easier. And so my son, who has worked a lot with engineering teams, came up with this idea of find a focus with tripe. So you can say, is it our tools? Is there something we can improve about our tools? Is there something we can improve about the resources that we have? Not people, but other kinds of resources that we need. Do we need access to decision making? Do we need access to the database? Whatever that might be. do we want to improve our interactions? Is there something about how we are working together as a team that would help us improve? What about our work process? Is there some little adjustment we could make there? And what about the environment around us? And that can be an online environment or the physical environment if you're co-located. And that by cycling through those 5 tools, resources, interactions, process, environment, one retrospective after another, the team eventually begins to develop the kind of skill and awareness that they need to maybe tackle some bigger issues. Thanks, Will. And then when you have a more experienced team that are ready to look at bigger issues, even in a small way, you can just ask more open-ended questions. What improvements could we make? What impediments can we reduce or eliminate? When do we need to learn more? What do we need to learn more about? What progress can we capture or make sure that we continue? And what can we examine to expand our view beyond the code? What else do we need to be aware of as a delivery team, if that's who we're talking about, that will help us? Do we need to know more about our customers? Do we need to know more about our interactions with other parts of the organization, and so on? So these are, as you can tell, these are a little more abstract questions, and it takes a little more experienced team to be able to respond to these. And then another one that I really love is something called Merrick's Missing Manifesto Elements. Brian Merrick was one of the Agile Manifesto signers. And when he looked at, some years later, the manifesto, he said, I really think we missed some things. And so he came up with the missing manifesto: discipline and skill, ease and joy. So how can your team improve by creating improve their skill, improve their discipline, but also improve the ease with which they're able to do their work and their joy in the work? And those are some very interesting questions to deal with. So this all adds up because we're continually improving how the team is working and what it's working on and so on. And Paul Akers, in his book, 2-Second Lean, says something very similar, looking at it from the lean point of view. It's not just about making everything faster. It's not making more retrospectives. That's not what we're trying to do. We don't need a greater volume of retrospectives necessarily. What we need is improving the quality of everything that we do. And so it doesn't need to be a big change. It's small baby steps, working toward improving everything every day. And so that's the reason why, that's the big why behind this, is that we want to keep that improvement engine going smoothly along in small steps and making improvements as often as we possibly can. But that brings us to macro retros. And these aren't much smaller than your maybe normal Scrum retro at the end of a sprint. These are bigger than that. They include more people, they take on bigger scope, and so on. And so the considerations we want to think about when we are trying to achieve organizational learning or departmental learning or whatever that larger group might be. How many participants are going to be involved in it? How many perspectives do they represent? What is the issue or the focused complexity? Is there conflict or controversy involved? What's the setting? Are they in a remote environment, or are they going off site if they're an on-site group? Are they just staying in their own workspaces? What is it? What is that going to be? Is this a quarterly? Is this like a PI planning kind of thing? And what is the cross-organizational involvement that we need? So we need to consider all of those things, and that begins to tell us maybe how often we could bring this group together, how often issues come up between and among the members of this group. But retrospectives at this level are still incredibly useful to the organization. And there are handfuls of organizations that I know that are doing this, but the ones that are getting huge benefits from it. So we might need to increase the frequency. So again, the question, how do you work together? How do you work cross-organizationally now? How do you work on a release that includes the delivery team, the DevOps considerations, the marketing and sales people, the product people, who all do we need to bring together, and how often can we accomplish that? So that becomes, we have to look at, how do we work now? Where are those opportunities to bring everyone together? And again, the focus is on what could we do? So are there improvements we could make in delivery or discovery or DevOps or product quality? Are there broad improvements we could make in psychological safety or employee engagement? What about clarity around learning? What do we need to learn about business needs, customer needs, professional development for people in our organization? What are our learning needs? How do we clarify and capture value, business value, organizational value, customer value? And do we need to collaborate across silos? What kind of silos are in our organization, and what kinds of collaboration would make a more joyful workplace, right? So these are all questions you might ask at the organizational scope level. So what I'm advocating for here is that we spend much less time on ineffective retrospectives. And to be honest, whenever I ask somebody about their retrospectives and they say, well, we always ask two questions. What went well and what should we do differently? And that is an insights question, and it leaves out getting everybody involved in the big picture and everybody involved in the decision making. You usually end up with one or two voices who've already decided what the right idea is and are already going to advocate for it on behalf of the rest of the team. So make sure, when people tell me that, I say, you're wasting your time. And that's the one thing we never want to do. We want to use time wisely on effective in retrospectives, not waste time on just so we can check a box and say we did a retrospective, which too many managers and agile coaches and things will advocate for, that we just make sure that we do it. And that's just theater. That's not real improvement. So we want to pursue real continuous improvement. There is one big continuous improvement no-no. And this is another gift that I got from Willem. And it is an anti-pattern called the devil's pom-poms. And this is when you hear your team say, oh, we don't need another retrospective. Oh, we're doing fine. We don't need any more retrospectives. No, it takes too much time away from work. We're doing fine. We're okay. Right? So that's like cheerleading, the devil's pom-poms, right? There's always room for improvement. There is always room for some small improvement. And whether it's something you need to fix or a prospective improvement, which is, wow, because we've been doing this, things have gotten a lot better. Let's make sure we keep doing this, right? That is also a useful kind of improvement to make, to ensure that you keep doing those things that really work. So what I want to appeal to you for is to activate whole team learning and whole organization learning. And in doing that, you need to find your right cadence, learn at the right scale. Where is the issue? Is it a team issue? For those of you who may know circles and soup, that's another way of kind of thinking about where does the issue lie. So learn at the right scale, micro to macro, learn as frequently as possible with the group and the issues that you are dealing with, and whatever, make that drive for continually improving. So in this new book, we've added some things. We now have, some of the things are still in that were in the book before, and we've added to them. We've improved those sections, but we've also introduced some very new material in it. And I've highlighted those here. We have a dedicated chapter for working with remote and hybrid or asynchronous retrospectives. We have offered lots of different alternatives for improvement actions. We talk about how do you make those decisions about what you want to do to improve, and then stick with it and then follow through on it. We heard a lot about, people who say we don't want to do any more retrospectives, are waving those devil's pom-poms. And so we've got a section on enticing team members to give it another try, some techniques for doing that. And using data, again, we brought in a lot of stories from the field, which before, when we wrote the first book, there weren't very many stories from the field that we could have gathered, but now there are a lot. And so we were able to include quite a number of folks' stories. And then designing new ideas for designing and facilitating with that focus on team learning and analysis. And there's a lot of more stuff. So what can you influence? You can influence leaders. Leaders everywhere can influence. And what I like to say when people tell me, oh, this is all fluffy bunny, woo-woo stuff, these retrospectives, they're not really about real improvement. They're just about making team members feel better. What I say is you invest a great deal of time and effort to recruit, hire, manage, and lead the very best leaders and team members you can find. Turnover is expensive. So if you want to have a practical bottom line impact, help your leaders learn to lead without blame, pursue continuous improvement, emphasize learning, resilience, and fluency right from the start when your teams first come together, or when they've really begun to thrash and you need to do a reset, and then get the best with the people you have by giving them the kind of dynamic environment they need to do the learning for learning work, the nature of the work that they have to do today. So I'd also invite you to stay in touch with me. I travel around a lot. Actually, this summer I will be at the XP conference in Switzerland. Then I will be at another conference in Austria, and then I'm doing 3 workshops in Vienna. I'm going to be at the German Coach Camp for those of you who might be going that far. And I'm also going to be at the Socrates conference in mid-July. Then I'm coming back to the US and I'll be at the Big Agile conference in Denver, Colorado. So that's just the next 3 months. So I'm continually on LinkedIn now. I call myself the roving leadership agility advisor because I'm moving around the world quite a bit. So to stay in touch, know when I'm going to be travel, and get in touch with me and say, I see that you're coming to my area. I'd love to have coffee. I'd love to bring you into my organization to just talk with some people, whatever it might be. This is the best way to keep track of where I'm going to be and how you can get in touch with me. And now we are at questions. So I invite you to ask me anything. I'm going to stop the sharing the slides. I think. Wait a minute. Do I have anything more here? Oh, yeah, no. I will send you a set of these PDF of these slides. I'm happy to do that. I'll coordinate with Ines and Helen about that. And I'm going to turn that off and ask me anything. And Ines, if you and Helen, if you will help kind of navigate the questions that showed up in the chat or the ones that pop up now, I would appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Diana. All right, so Giovanni, I know that at the beginning you sort of put a question in the chat. You want to take the opportunity to take us through your thoughts or something else?
There you go. No, I find a lot of the problems with retrospectives come from the fact that the teams are not empowered to be self-managing or even cross-functional.
Right.
So it's like you're trying to do the best, which is why I gave a wavy hand at the very first question. Sometimes, and there is value in it.
Yeah.
The retrospective is okay. Let's have a bit of a moan, but let's move forward.
Yeah.
Emphasis on the let's move forward. Otherwise, it
Right.
becomes a moaning shop. Sorry, I'm grabbing some chocolate as I speak.
Oh, well, if you're taking that opportunity,
so then it becomes okay, within the constraints that we have, what's the best that we can do? You have to reframe the question.
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't know if you're familiar with the activity called Circles and Soup, but it is, let's throw all the issues up there and then let's identify. It's in the new book, yes, yes, and it's actually on my website, I have a section called News, which is actually the blog and everything else that we want to throw in there that's something new we were saying. And so it's there as well. But the idea behind Circles and Soup is you have the team throw up everything they can think of, not throw up like vomit, but try to put on sticky notes on an online whiteboard or a physical one. And everything they can think of that is in their way, that's is getting in the way of them doing the best job they could. And then they do a sort. Then you draw these three big circles, and the middle one says team controls, and the next one out says team influences, and the next one out is called the soup.
I've done CIA before, which is quite similar. Control, influence, accept.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's just somebody else's name for it. And the idea being that the team then looks at those sticky notes and they pluck out the ones that they actually do control. And then I label those direct action. So you can decide on any of these, but only maybe one or two if they're very tiny. But take direct action on these. The team is in control of that. But then the tricky part comes because there's the influence part. And the influence part is also a team action, but it's not a direct action. It's an indirect action. It's a persuasion action, a recommendation action, maybe needing to do some research before we go and advocate for this thing. And who is it that we really need to influence? And so there's still a bunch of thinking and action the team needs to do in order to affect those pieces of the issues that they're dealing with. And then what you called the accept, I don't call accept. I call it the soup. And I'm saying, and because a friend of mine just said, that's just the cultural soup we swim in our organization. So we call that the soup. But there our actions are response actions. It's not roll over and accept it. It's what do we need to do to change how we respond to this, to think about it differently and see if we can find some allies about this in the organization. There are still things that the team can do, but they aren't the things that they directly control. So they have to go at it a little differently. So what I always advocate for is that the team take advantage of time to handle as many of those issues the team controls as possible. Get those off the table. And in so doing, they're gaining skills in making improvements, and then they can tackle some of those influence issues. And then finally, once they've done that and they get those mostly cleared away, then they can start really doing the introspection of looking at how do we want to respond when the rest of the organization is handing us lemons, how do we make lemonade out of it, right? If you like that metaphor. I don't really, but it's what came to mind. So thank you, Giovanni. Thank you. That's a great question.
All right, Fergal, you're up next. And maybe a little bit of context from your question.
Yeah, sure. So I was laughing when I was hearing you talk about Superman 2 and Office Space, and I have a daughter at university, and her generation have gone through COVID.
Yes.
We're more used to working hybrid, but there's a noise aspect that this generation has that I feel that if it's not in a revision, then you're missing out on something. I mean, that's just my viewpoint of it. And also, what I thankfully my daughter is studying psychology, and it's very interesting to hear a university psychology person saying just because we say something doesn't mean that it's either gone in or that we agree, because in their generation, silence, they're much easier to deal in that silence. So again, that's why I brought it up. It's about Generation Z and how they approach retrospectives.
Right. Well, and it takes new and different facilitation techniques, which people are working on all the time, about how do we encourage people who engage differently to let us know that they either are or are not engaged. And some of the best things that I have heard have come from asking, what is it you need to be able to think about this in this way? And so, I mean, that actually gives me an idea for the next open space I'm in, of asking some Gen Z folks to come together with me and educate me, an area where I need more learning, about what are the best ways to help them engage online and be able to create real co-intelligence in their teams, so that they really are sharing everyone's skills and so on. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think my daughter was saying to me something like, when we say I hear you, I don't think we necessarily think of I hear you in the same way that group are thinking I hear you. I mean, it's just something that I have to deal with as well.
Right. Yeah. I've been learning a little slang. I now know that fire means something good. So
I had the same revelation the other day around sick. Apparently that's a good thing. But then my nephew told me that was like 2 months ago, so it's well out. I was like,
it's
my bad.
It's hard to keep up. Yeah. Well, my parents couldn't keep up with me either, so it's a it's a pattern.
Yeah, natural
a generational pattern.
Right.
All right, we've got 2 minutes. So is there one more short question? So I'm very aware of that time box, Helen.
I love that. I was just about to bring that in, but you're on it. So, any burning questions in the last few seconds?
Well, if for any of you, if you are going to be any of the places I'm going to be in the next few months, I'd love to get together with you, talk with you, get your feedback on this talk, or feel free to write to me on connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm always looking to expand my network. I value the network I have in this community very much, and I love adding to it. So
Yes, thank you, Diana. And just on that note of feedback, we love getting feedback on these sessions because, to be honest with you, there is no point Ines and I rallying around trying to get people like Diana on, all these other people. If it doesn't really, if you don't like it and you don't want it, we ain't going to do it, right? So
We're not that easy to get.
No, you're really not. It takes a little bit of time. So do put your feedback. And if you want to hear other speakers, other people, anybody, any topic that you're struggling with, we basically just go out to find that. That's who we do. That's our aim. So do fill that in. We'd love to know. We'll also feed the feedback back to Diana as well. So be kind, but be helpful. That's what I say with feedback. That's pretty much it, guys. So thank you so much for joining us, Diana. Thank you so much. It was really, the right word is enlightening to have a retrospective talk that didn't just talk about what do we improve and what do we do it, because we all know that, right? It was nice to see something different, and I've taken a lot of notes. So good luck to my teams.
Don't throw it all on them at once. That's another piece of advice I would give you.
I definitely won't. All right, thank you, guys. So it's over and out. And thanks again, Diana, and good night.